Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and our second after show for the Bad Batch. And we're talking today all about episode 3, The Solitary Clone. And we're going to be getting into the details of this, just picking out things we liked and talking about the nitty-gritty stuff, making connections and more with our friend Kirk and your co-host Blake. So, let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
All right, welcome back, you guys.
Hey, good to be back.
It's very good to be back.
Good to have you guys back and chatting about another Star Wars show, another episode, another week. You know, it's crazy how much stuff we get all the time. And this one was a big one. This episode was yeah. I was keeping an eye out on the Star Wars Twitter. I call it the Star Wars Twitter just because I'm following so many Star Wars accounts that it may as well just be a source of the Force kind of thing, you know. But David W. Collins is a great guy to follow. You know, he works at Skywalker Sound and very notably, you know, had a lot to do on The Force Unleashed back in the day, and he's been a Lucasfilm employee for quite some time, and he was very, you know, adamant about kind of saying like this was his favorite episode of the season. So, you know, that was...
Oh, okay. But he's seen every episode as opposed to only the 3. I would say this is my favorite episode so far as well.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, like he's done the sound design for most of the series. So I guess he has probably seen them all and, you know, would likely be a great opinion to kind of take in, you know, when it comes to this kind of stuff. So he said his favorite episode. So I don't know. I don't think that necessarily means the best, but he likes it the most. And I thought it was awesome. So yeah.
It was definitely one of the, even compared to season 1, it was quite high up there. If not my probably favorite episode out of both seasons so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything.
Can we go one step further? What if we included Clone Wars? Would it still be at the top?
Ooh, it holds...
Probably not.
No, no, not at the top of Clone.
Okay, so not that good, but
pretty
within
good.
its own world. Yeah.
But pretty good. You know, it was the best Star Wars episode ever that featured Crosshair and Cody.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah. I would say that.
Yeah. The Solitary Clone. This episode starts off with the Empire attempting to expand to a new planet that's fresh to the canon called Desix. And I actually really like the name of this planet. It just feels Star Wars to me, you know, Desix. It also turns out that Crosshair has been left on... did you guys catch that little remark that he says? He was left on Kamino for 32 rotations, all right? I looked up in the Star Wars Atlas how many hours each rotation is, and it's 27. 27 hours for each rotation. So he was on that platform for over a month. Without food or water, and I don't know how he made it, but he figured it out.
Wait, why did they leave him there for? Did they forget about him, or was like a search party? Did they explain that?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Blake, do you remember the season 1 finale?
I believe they went back to Kamino to try to figure out Omega stuff, and
They went back to
it's been a year.
Yeah,
right?
no, all good.
I'm halfway there.
Yeah, you're halfway there. Yeah. So the Bad Batch goes to Camino in the finale to rescue Hunter because he's been kidnapped by or taken, I guess, by Crosshair, and Crosshair is planning to use Hunter as bait to lure the Clone Force 99 to Camino and obviously bring Omega there. And while they're there, he pulls some stunt, and they end up killing those kind of wannabe stormtrooper, the beta squad, the people that were wearing clone trooper costumes but not actually clones. And then he kind of gives them a choice and says, like, you can join the Empire or kind of suffer the consequence kind of thing. But he gives them a chance to kind of, in his eyes, redeem themselves, towards his perspective of like how the Empire is all great and everything. And then they end up, things end up going south when the Empire bombards Topeka City and essentially tries to sink it into the sea. Because they all clear out, they pull out of that, their whole operation, they pull out and they kill off some of the Kaminoans there and they're attempting to leave. And the whole thing is kind of sinking and, them and Crosshair kind of get out in the nick of time. But yeah, when they leave on their ship, which is in like a hidden landing platform, like kind of far off somewhere else.
Right.
They,
the elevator thing underwater.
Yeah. There's like an underwater hidden tube that goes to one of the Kaminoans, like hidden like laboratories or whatever. And, they give Crosshair a chance to rejoin their squad and they say like, you can come with us. So they give him the same chance that he gave them. And he decides to also refuse. And so they just say, okay, see ya. So.
And it was revealed that his chip, if he had one, never worked to begin with. That's just who he was.
Yes. Yeah. He said that he claims at least that he had his chip removed and that we're meant to believe that his opinions of the Empire are his own. Which is supposed to kind of linger with that character as every time we see him. We're now for this season, we're supposed to remember the fact that, he is making his own choices. And I think that plays a lot in the plot of this episode and just kind of the things that Cody says, throughout his appearances in this episode as well. Just like the things that have to do with being a good soldier and all that. So, again, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen this Bad Batch episode, but a little too late to hit that. I'm always too late to hit the spoiler button.
I mean, to be completely fair, we've got the episode being the breakdown of this particular episode. So maybe it's just a spoiler warning from the beginning. Retros.
That's true.
Yeah. Retroactive.
Just open with it before you even say anything.
Kirk, I got a question for you. What did you think about Cody's repaint?
Honestly, if they didn't mention that he was Cody, like within, like I think Crosshair may have mentioned it, or the general, I wouldn't have actually realized it was him because he was just in like normal armor, and it kind of looked like quite similar to all the other clones. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I'm glad that he's back because I don't think we've seen him since whatever the last Clone Wars episode probably that we saw him. So it was good for him to be back. And I liked how they paired him up with Crosshair because we kind of, again, spoilers, but yeah, he was kind of like the opposite of Crosshair. Crosshair was obviously more and more leaning towards supporting the Empire, and then Cody was more so kind of having that feeling that his inhibitor chip was almost wearing off, I guess, maybe. So I'm not sure. But yeah, it was good to see him. It was good to see him.
Yeah.
There's almost remorse coming from him. It felt like he had a lot of regrets.
Yeah, it did feel like that. It's interesting because he's almost trying to pry for information out of Crosshair and try and get an idea as to what his opinions are about the Empire. And it's really apparent to him that Crosshair is an Imperial believer. And he also asks about Clone Force 99, and he also reveals to us in the beginning of this episode that more and more clones have been questioning the Order, which, by the Order, he means Order 66. And like you said, Kirk, about the effects of the chip, the way that Rex or somebody, I don't know, Blake, maybe you can maybe you can try and remember which this moment was as well, but I feel like we've heard one of the characters at some point say that it's almost like a nightmare that they were living where, oh, maybe it was Wrecker. I think it was Wrecker in season 1 said that. He was like a nightmare. He couldn't control himself. He couldn't control his body. You know, he couldn't control his actions. He was just kind of, you know, trapped, and something else was driving him. So it was, you know, it's a bit of a scary thing. And I guess like once that's all over, you know, it kind of like lingers or wears off a little bit. I guess like a nightmare would kind of like leave you in the morning, but you'd still remember and think about it.
Well, it's almost like a hypnosis.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to hypnotist? You know, like I think when it's over, it's just you either, it'll be like a dream state, or you like don't quite remember all of it, but you know what happened.
Right.
That's what I'm guessing it was like.
Yeah, that's what my guess would be too. Yeah. Very cool to see clones and droids again in this episode. I mean, it felt very. It's not like
Clone Wars.
Yeah, it felt very Clone Warsy. Yeah, but in a very, very cool, unique sort of way. With this, you know, being this is the Empire now, right? And you know, an Imperial's been taken hostage. You know, it's all about retrieving this guy. It's a retrieval mission. But it felt very Clone Warsy. You know, the whole vibe about it, and yet, you know, I just kept thinking to myself, like, this is probably one of the last times that we're going to see this, you know, as far as like a animated episode goes, you know, unless they do more Tales of the Jedi that we see clones fighting droids and stuff like that. This show is probably going to be the last that we get, which really delivers us Clone Wars style content, right? You know, visually on screen. I don't know. Has it kind of like stuck with you guys at all, or?
Yeah, I feel that a little bit, but I hope that Lucasfilm turns around and makes a 4-hour cut of Revenge of the Sith in the Clone Wars animated style. So yeah, I think that's coming out next year. So maybe we'll get some more of it.
Release
How
the
exciting.
Lucas cut. Yeah.
Well, the original one was the Luke's cut.
Well, it's like that. What is it? James Cameron's Avatar 2? I think wasn't it 9 hours or something? His original.
Oh my gosh.
Original cut. I don't know what the heck they could have cut from that movie. That 3-hour movie was
6 hours of content on the
so
cutting room
long.
floor.
Yeah.
I feel like there wasn't enough water scenes, so that's probably what the extra 6 hours was. Just like James Cameron, like filming an Avatar, just dripping in the water, just being like, just chilling. 6 hours.
100%. Yeah. Oh man.
Just lots of whale sequences of them all just swimming together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like this is going to be the last time, or not the last time, but we're getting further and further into these shows and being like, well, how much more can they show us in the past, or like in that era of the Clone Wars? So I don't know. I
more packed, right? Like how much more space can they find in there?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed seeing, and I always like seeing like this era of Star Wars merging with the next as well.
Yeah.
I like that a lot too. Yeah, that's a very, very cool, because it brings in the stuff that a lot of Star Wars fans love and recognize, like Stormtroopers. But then we're getting that story that we didn't think we needed, or the story that I guess we never thought we would get, which is that proto clone Stormtrooper, you know, the first of the first TK units with that new helmet.
Yeah, I saw that. That's the original Stormtrooper design by Ralph McQuarrie.
Yeah, and it's very cool to implement all that stuff. So, you know, you're going way back and digging some nostalgia out, but you're also making something new, and in the newer era that, you know, of course, like a lot of us kind of grew up with, you know, anyone who was born prior to when the prequels are coming out, you know, that's also nostalgic for us. And then it's done in a style of a show in which kind of new Star Wars fans can also appreciate. So, there's so many things to love about this show, and we get droid humor again. You know, probably for one of the last times.
It's always so slapstick. It's interesting. All the other shows I feel like are super serious, and then Clone Wars just has these ridiculous droids.
Yeah, exactly. What's the next thing? Okay, so the infiltration mission. I thought it was excellent. I thought the cinematography wise, you know, shot for shot, the sound, the action, you know, everything was really well done. And Blake, what did you think about this? You know, just the action sequence.
It was very infiltratory, which I thought was a lot of fun. Almost very like sneak in, got your squad mates. I thought I think Crosshair has some really cheesy moments to me that I'm not sure if I buy it. Like, do you guys think if you shot up the barrel of a tank, it would explode?
I mean, is the Bad Batch, right? Like,
he's so talented. He did he can do anything. I thought what was a little bit more crazy was that
the mirrors,
the mirrors. Like,
yeah,
he
I was gonna
threw the mirrors around, and then when he's like to Cody, just throw the mirror, and then he shoots it, and then it perfectly hits. Like, I mean, obviously this guy's been doing a lot of push-ups, he's been doing a lot of training, and he knows how to use a sniper rifle, but I thought that was a little bit ridiculous.
It was a bit over the top. Just the fact that there was multiple mirrors, so they'd all have to line up perfectly.
Yeah, it's
whatever. I guess it's
a little far-fetched, but it's still cool, right? Like, it's just like
it was cool. Like, this is reserved for animation style style stuff. So
100%. I think that's what makes Clone Force 99 such a great group of characters to do an animated series about, because and that's probably one of the biggest questions that a lot of people may have. It's like, why the Bad Batch, right? But that's a great reason to kind of present when you're describing this show. It's like, yeah, this is a great group of characters, just like might not play off well in live action, but like they tend to, they're all those characters. It's like every single one of them that all has a special ability. It's almost like a bunch of super geeky Star Wars fans got in a room with a bunch of comic book fans, and we're like, okay, what if there was a clone trooper that could be like the Hulk? Or
oh man,
it pretty much is that.
Yeah, like, what if there was a clone trooper that had all the skills that Hawkeye has? Yeah,
oh man,
yeah,
super soldiers, genetically enhanced.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Crosshair, he I noticed that in this episode they come across a woman and a child kind of like trying to hide from all the action. And when Cody lowers his rifle and says like, it's okay, we're here to help, Crosshair just keeps his rifle like trained on the woman and the child when he sees them, and just like, it's a totally different, I don't know, like it's like they're a little bit, they're clearly on different kind of mental perspectives as to like how to approach this mission. Like, Crosshair's doing it in the name of the Empire, and Cody's still in that mindset, like what we were saying, like he's just kind of regretting a lot of stuff in his life. And it's like,
well, that was the clones through the entire war, right? Like they were doing this to save the galaxy from the Separatists and the droid armies. Quite often they would only show up after the Separatists had taken over a planet and put it under their rule. They would show up to try to liberate them. So taking these clones that were fighting for freedom, and now they're the ones being asked to put the boot down on people. It's just, it doesn't fly right with most of them. And as we hear towards the end of this, a lot of clones have been abandoning and going on the run, right? Which in and of itself is crazy, because this is all they've ever known, was to be a part of the Republic Army.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And and the Republic meant something to them. It's also a government in which kind of, even though it wasn't perfect, like it was still freedom for a lot of worlds. And when the Separatist alliance kind of like happened and broke off, and Civil War kind of went down and stuff, the clones were kind of perceived by many people as just like heroes, right? Except for those on the other side of the war, of course. But in general, now that everyone's kind of on the same side and under the boot of what used to be the Republic, they're no longer perceived as heroes. They're now being perceived as these villains, right? So, which they're not used to, because the war just ended, and all of a sudden, boom, just overnight, they just became, Jedi killers and enforcers of this empire that no one wants. So yeah, but then there's someone like Crosshair, which just believes in that, right? So it was interesting. It was an interesting little scene to kind of like see their differences, I guess.
Yeah, it almost makes me feel like you've got obviously the inhibitor chip, which has affected the clones significantly, but then there's also part of their programming on the inside, which is everything for the Republic and what their ideals were before the Empire. So it's almost like these two sides of their brains are almost kind of fighting with each other internally for all these clones. And obviously that previous side that supports the Republic, which is no longer in operation anymore, is almost kind of taking over that other what the effect the inhibitor chip has on the clones. So I feel like that's really what the Bad Batch show is exploring the most and trying to show us the most and Crosshair and Cody are the two kind of polar opposites of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Kirk, what did you think about that moment when Cody saves Crosshair's life, and then obviously what follows that up with Crosshair doing what he does? What did you think about all that stuff?
Oh yeah, that was my favorite moment in the whole show. Not because I have a thing against Crosshair. Well, I mean, I guess I do, but I just like it just showed it was like the brief moment where Crosshair showed a little bit of, I guess, humanity to him. Like he was so desperate and he was so out of character because of how desperate he was, because he needed obviously Cody to help him. And I was really focused then. I was like, whoa, he can actually break, and he does have a bit of a limit. So I don't know whether or not that shows he will change or he's actually got something inside of him. Because before you kind of like, he's just this robot that follows the Empire's orders, and there's no chance he'll move. But yeah, he got really desperate then, and without Cody, he'd be a pancake.
It's almost interesting that he started off that way, like still being hard after what happened to the season finale. Because it seems like since then he's kind of been stripped of his rank a bit and demoted and stuff.
Yeah, since his failure with the you mean Crosshair, right?
Crosshair, yeah.
Like
end of last season,
with his failure, I guess, to deal with his old counterparts. Yeah, that I think kind of didn't help, right? That's kind of why they say at the beginning, it's like, oh no, you're not ready to lead a squad yet. We're gonna assign you to I forget Cody's number, but of course they don't use the names because it's the Empire. But yeah, that was a really cool moment.
2224.
Oh, excellent. Nice work. You got it up on Wikipedia, don't you?
Nope. I remember that from the episode because they specifically said it.
Really? Oh, nice. I'm impressed. Yeah.
He asked me tomorrow. I probably won't remember, though. It's probably because I watched it like 4 hours ago. Yeah.
Blake, do you remember Mina Bonteri?
I recognize the name.
Lux Bonteri's mother.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Lux. So, yeah, this would have been one of the governors that was when the councilor chambers. And they're dealing with Dooku, and then Ahsoka showed up. Yeah,
she was a separatist senator. And Mina Bonteri was a friend of Padme's. And there was a Clone Wars arc called, I think it was called... Heroes on Both Sides.
Both Sides? Yeah. I think that's the right one, yeah.
Yeah, it was a season 3 episode, and it had Ahsoka and Padme journey to Raxus, which is the separatist homeworld, which we did see in the first season of The Bad Batch. And I think it was Raxus, or at least, or somewhere. But yeah, they were able to get a shuttle there and kind of smuggle themselves in, sort of thing, and meet up with Mina Bonteri, who was hoping to work with Padme to kind of come up with some way of presenting a peace treaty to each of their own respective governments. And it turns out that the governor, who we see in this episode, is actually, she was, because now Mina Monteri's been killed, but she's an old friend of Mina Bonteri's, and she was actually part of that arrangement, which we didn't see, of course, but here a Bad Batch episode comes, following up a Clone Wars episode from season 3. Of all times, which I thought was pretty nuts, because I didn't think we would ever get follow-ups to arcs like that, right? They just seem so resolved and complete, but here we are getting new perspectives on things in the Bad Batch, like it has been doing for its whole existence so far. It's been great. So Cody,
and I think we talked about this a bit last week as well.
Yeah,
we're kind of figuring out what happened to the separatist planets, because I think I had remarked on, it seemed like they had all been bombarded orbitally. Like they basically just like nuked the planets. But now we're finding out some of them are just being forced under the rule of the Empire, almost like Rome.
Yeah, exactly. So not all of them were hit hard, but yeah, some of them definitely kind of being forced, and also just some of the independent systems, because Desix is a independent system, and they made that pretty clear at the beginning of the episode. So for the Empire to just come in, we just finished talking about Andor not too many weeks ago. And the same thing happens there, like the corporate authority kind of comes in with, I guess, guns a-blazing and causes some trouble. And the Empire kind of steps in and goes, hey, you're not fit to I guess, govern or police this sector. So, the ISB, the Empire, we're going to take it from here. You're all fired. So, it's just like the Empire is, as we see it over the next 15 to 20 years, constantly expanding, and in a way in which we get to Star Wars Rebels, much later on in the timeline, and the Empire comes in to Lothal and does the exact same thing. They burn people's farms. They start up work camps. They take over the city. They take over buildings. The people in power there either work with the Empire or they're executed. And it's just a pattern. One after the next. All these different places, independent or not. They either get enveloped in the Empire or they burn for not joining. So.
It's good that we see like this happening in so many different, like obviously Andor approached it so differently to how the Bad Batch and then Rebels approached each one, but it's good to see there's a bit of consistency with what the Empire does across the time period, across different shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cody tries to make peace with the governor. He's clearly regretful of all the killing that's happened in the previous 3 years, and Crosshair ends up following the orders to kill the governor instead, and breaks Cody's offer to keep the peace. And I just thought that scene was like really well done. The whole thing that played out, it's just played out as expected, but also a bit of surprise, when Crosshair pulls the trigger. I thought that was pretty interesting.
It was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it was a surprise, but not a surprise.
I'd say... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kirk.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like it was more of a surprise given that Cody just saved Crosshair's life and Crosshair just like begged for his life for the first time. Mm-hmm. Without that, like it wouldn't have been a surprise for me at all. But for me, it was slightly a surprise just because of what happened like literally like 15 seconds ago.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, because I think that's supposed to be the curveball, right? Well, I think like it's kind of, I don't know, not common that a reg saved one of the members of Clone Force 99, which is, I guess, we think of them as like these invincible clones, but they're really not. They just have these abilities, and really showed his weak spot. Or to quote Dom from Fast and Furious, "We all got a weak spot."
Just old habits, I guess. Really, is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Exactly.
What surprised me, I would say, though, is that it seems like that must have been the final straw for Cody, because at that point he bailed, went on the run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, and that was the last straw, I think, and this came up during Andor as well. Like, what does it take for someone to be a rebel? Like, how many things does the Empire have to do until someone hits their breaking point? And that was Cody's. Like, he'd been through enough, and it's been over a year, I think, around a year since Revenge of the Sith kind of took place, and I guess Cody has just kind of gone through enough stuff, enough garbage, that this was just the last straw, and he's like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm putting down the blaster and I'm walking away because this isn't right. So, the occupation of Desix begins. The Empire arrives. They're going to set up work camps, most likely, just like Lothal, just like many other planets. And we see the TKs, the stormtroopers, coming in wave after wave, right after all the clones leave. And the TKs are there to kind of keep watch of the people and keep the Empire's order intact on that planet. and you see the big looming Star Destroyer in the sky, and to me, it just felt so much like some of the stuff that we saw in previous Star Wars shows, and very much a reflection of like the past dying. Like the clones do their stuff, they leave, and then in swarms the Empire. And they're there to
it's interesting, hey?
Yeah.
Like they use the clones, the trained soldiers come in and do all the work, and then the stormtroopers come in and they basically act as security to make sure everyone knows they're being watched all the time, not step out of line.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a bit like Tatooine, kind of left alone and not really managed for quite some time, and then all of a sudden, boom. Now there's stormtroopers all over the place, and they're looking for someone, but now it's like they've occupied that world and more closely, and I think they're now kind of keeping a much greater watch on the place, right? Which by the time we get to A New Hope, all the way from Revenge of the Sith, 19 years later to A New Hope, like the Empire's just expanded to the Outer Rim, and it's kind of reached that point of like smothering everyone and every world they could possibly reach. And that's when we get that moment where they finally fight back and blow up the Death Star. But Cody tells Crosshair the decisions they make matter, and it's why they're different than droids. It's not about the orders; it's about being a good soldier, by doing what's right. And he asks Crosshair, like, is the Empire making the galaxy a better place? And I don't know, maybe like each of you guys, we'll start with Kirk. Like, what did you think about this scene, what he says, and just the whole moment that played out there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this was a real clear indication of what the purpose is of the Bad Batch show. It's not just to show a group of unordinary clones running around doing brute force stuff, and like this is really like the underpinning of the whole show. Like, what is the purpose of the clones and what is right and wrong from their perspective? Obviously, we've seen the perspective of, Andor has really brought us into a whole new light now, but before Andor, it was really through the perspective of the Jedi and everything. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like we get an even different perspective, but purely from the clones. And even the Clone Wars, like a lot of it was about the Jedi, and we did get a lot of brief moments with the clones. Like one of my favorite arcs, I've completely forgotten I think it's the Krell arc, where they fought against him was a really good showcase of that. But I think that it was almost like a reminder for the audience, like, this is what this show is about. This is what we're trying to showcase between what is right and wrong from the clones' perspective, and obviously how they're dealing with everything. So obviously, I think that we're going to see more and more clones throughout this show defect and hear their reasoning and everything behind it, which I think is a great thing because it gets us a bit more of a deeper connection to understanding what the clones are about and how they're thinking and everything. So, and obviously I do side with Cody over Crosshair because Crosshair's delusional.
Yeah.
Blake, so true.
Yeah, but what about you, Blake? Yeah.
No, I think Kirk is spot on, and I hope they do focus more in on that because I've always found it to be very interesting. And I know that the EU, they realized they had worked themselves into this same problem. We've brought this up before quite a while back when we first were talking about brain chips and stuff, because that was in the end the solution they went with. But in the original EU, what they did towards the end of the Clone Wars, as the more veteran clones that were friends with the Jedi all died off, they replaced them with these, like, I think they were cloned faster, and their growth enhancement was even faster, so they aged very quickly, and they trained them poorly but to really follow orders really well, and those were the clones that actually turned on the Jedi as opposed to the ones that we know.
Interesting.
But it altogether, it still leaves this issue where the transition into the Empire with the stormtroopers and the clones, how they are going to receive basically becoming the bad guys. Because the excuse in the EU was these quickly trained, really submissive clones that were just there to follow orders. Because they used the brain chip instead in canon, they still have that hole. So these moral characters and clones, they're going through that transition into the Empire from the Republic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and it's such a cool transition to see as well because in the EU, right? Like it's never really been as consistent as the canon. As far as like what exactly is going on, and the Bad Batch is now that new chapter that they're
finally filling that in.
Yeah,
because I guess we were kind of left at the end of the Clone Wars series where when the brain chips kicked in, it seemed like they were active all the time. Yes. So it's like once they were activated, they were just in kill Jedi mode and just take orders. Yeah. But as we've seen, that only activates while Jedi are in their presence.
Yeah, is true. Yeah, while Jedi are in their presence, and if the order is activated, because in the Vader comic, I don't. Did you read the Dark Lord of the Sith Darth Vader comic series?
I did a long time. At least the issue you're talking about, I know you're referring to.
So there's a Jedi that figures
Vader, I think.
Yeah, there's a Jedi that figures it out, and when Vader's hunting a Jedi at this point, this is like probably around the same time as the Bad Batch taking place, like the first season that is, and Vader's hunting down a Jedi with some clones, and when this guy, he's like, or maybe it was an Inquisitor, I forget. I think it was an Inquisitor. And this Jedi is essentially figured out like what triggers them, right? So when this Inquisitor is kind of fighting him and he's kind of pinned against the wall, he kind of just has this little moment where he reveals like, what he's discovered, and he actually gives the order. He says to the clones like, execute Order 66. And these clones start firing on both of them, like the Inquisitor and him. Because in their eyes, they're Force users, they have to die, right? So it's very, very interesting, and it kind of makes me wonder, like, what made them not turn on Anakin? I guess,
right?
Like was there something in the code that just prevented them from...
It's funny because all these, I can't say I'm surprised, but by going with like the brain chip excuse, it does create a lot of these weird plot holes. Whereas as clunky as the idea was with the old sub clones, it didn't create as many issues like this.
Right. And as far as like their disappearance from the series goes, I do like what the Bad Batch is doing, where they are kind of making it a thing of like, post kind of remorse for this nightmare that they had to act and live out, along with the oppression of the Empire. And, they just don't care about the clones anymore. Not to mention they're, they canceled all the orders for future clone units. So there was that as well. The implementation of all the TK units, so there's like a series of events that are all kind of
very obviously being phased out, and the clones themselves don't feel comfortable with what they're doing anymore.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there's really no reason for them to stick around.
No, and it's all leading up to that point, which is about 9 years later once this season takes place, about 9 years later in Obi-Wan Kenobi, when we see that clone sitting on the streets in that world that Obi-Wan goes to try and rescue Leia. They have that really cool cameo with that 501st clone, and it's
501st one, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, whoa.
let me throw this out there. Do you think tensions will get high enough that there'll actually be a small civil war between TK units and clone troopers?
For sure. I think that'd be awesome to see.
I think so too. That just kind of dawned on me now.
Yeah,
maybe that's what they're going to lead up to.
I feel like that's a great thing, because it's almost like that's starting to be suggested, because I don't know the Admiral's name, but when Crosshair was speaking to the Admiral, the Admiral was like to Crosshair something along the lines that, so you clones are supposed to be taking orders and following orders and the most highly efficient units, and he almost suggested that there's been arguments within the Empire to get rid of the clones, or whether to keep them. Mm-hmm. And he kind of suggested that, hey, like you clones are becoming more and more useless now, and he's in more support of stormtroopers taking over. And I remember right at the start of the episode too, one of the clones at the cafeteria, they mentioned something along the lines of, "Oh, I hope they don't pass that bill today because it's going to be bad for us." So I really feel like that's a suggestion to something else, because I think that bill had something to do with like the Clone Reduction Act or something, something along those lines.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, like just the constant reminder that the clones are being forced out, right? And even Rampart, even the Imperial guy that Crosshair talks to, he kind of says to him when he comes into his office, he's like, "Why are you back?" Like we left you stranded on Camino for like over a month. Like, why did you show up again? And then Crosshair kind of gives his reasoning for being like an Imperial loyalist, right? And he doesn't really think much of it. This Rampart guy, he's like, "Okay, well, whatever. Like, here's your mission. See ya." He's like, "All right, well, he's just like, he doesn't care anymore. He's like, he doesn't care about the clones. No one else cares about the clones, as far as Imperials go. And the only person who thinks he's still making a difference in the galaxy is Crosshair. When really all the clones are just kind of like, well, this is what we were born to do. What else are we going to do? And then there's some people like Cody, which is just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've had enough. So I'm out of here. So it's very interesting, to see how like the fragmentation of like what's going to happen with all these millions of people that were bred for one purpose. Where do they all go and from here, kind of thing. So
it's funny. There's another EU. This is a different story altogether. This is what the Commando novels. If you remember, the Commandos specifically were trained to be a lot more Mandalorian in nature, taking after Jango. And after the Empire was formed, they started taking in a lot of defectors into a camp. I guess they had set up. They were hiding out on Mandalore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So like, my theory is that maybe something like that might happen. I mean, I also kind of wonder how Rex, Wolf, and Gregor end up back in the service of the Empire again, because they have to submit some sort of like, this is a little bit of spoiler for Star Wars Rebels, but they have to submit a report. Like when we meet those characters again, they have to tell the Empire that the dust ball that they're currently chilling on is all clear, of like rebel activity and whatever else. Like they have to just kind of send the green light all the time. And
I'm wondering that too.
It just makes me wonder, like Rex is currently not in the service of the Empire. He's currently laying low. People have gone AWOL. Like what the heck would drive him to go back voluntarily, if anything? Or what would have him, be forced back into the fold, I guess, or maybe it's his choice to be there, and he's actually reporting information to Bail Organa or something like that. Like who knows? But I'd like to see that story kind of play out as well, which hopefully we get answers to that in the Bad Batch as well. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great show. Did you guys have any kind of like last minute things you want to bring up before we wrap it up today?
Yeah, I was mentioning at the start of the. Oh, you go for it, Blake.
I mean, this might be too long-winded. I don't know, but I was wondering, Josh. There's the wall that we see Cody and Crosshair meet in front of, and then Crosshair's in front of it again at the end. And there's all these names, and I assume their names in Arabish. I'm wondering, did you bother figuring out what any of that is? Are those like clone names, or like what are those?
So I was able to just while I was watching it, I was trying to translate some of them in my head, and they all just they were just gibberish. It was just a bunch of random kind of like letters, like all strung together. I assume there are supposed to be names. I would imagine if they were names, they're probably names of notable clone captains or commanders or whatever. I don't know if that's 100% the case. I assume
it's on Camino, right?
Yeah,
wherever they are.
Actually,
what planet are they on?
That's Coruscant. That's Coruscant.
That's on Coruscant.
Yeah, okay. on Coruscant, the barracks, the clone barracks. We've seen it before, actually. I think in
the wall,
Tales of the Jedi. Actually, it made its most recent appearance. It was where Ahsoka first kind of started training with the clones in the kind of montage. Yeah, we've also seen it before in the final seasons of the Clone Wars. I think it was around the same time in which Ahsoka was framed for the bombing situation. So, it has showed up before. But yeah, that mural thing, that big wall with all the names on, that's new to me. And I assume it's not Jedi.
No, it doesn't seem like it's Jedi.
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's a great one to bring up. I think that one's, it's probably safe to say that those are CT numbers or clones, but I don't know. Maybe it was too much work.
It'd be funny if it was just, they just went to like a random number generator Star Wars name and then just translated them all to Arabic, put them on the wall.
That's the thing. They weren't even numbers. So, I'm just a little confused. Like, I guess that I think even that was too much work for whoever was in charge of doing the wall. So, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus or anything, but at the same time, I'm like, I was a little confused too. Cause I'm like, I just don't know what that is. Because like when Cody asks Crosshair about are we really making the galaxy a better place? He's like looking at that wall as if his question has something to do with those names on the wall, right? So, yeah,
like there's remorse in his words there.
Yeah,
that's what I assumed it was. I assumed it was all their brothers.
Right. Kirk, any last minute things here?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it probably before we started the show, but I think the Clone Wars art style continues to prove to be really good looking. I love the look of this show, and obviously because there's no live action stuff and they've really perfected the style of the Clone Wars. Like, I think I mentioned this at the start of the Tales of the Jedi series that we're doing. But yeah, every shot is just like a painting. Like you could just take a screenshot of most of these shots from this episode in particular, especially the outside ones on the planet, and frame them. They've done a great job.
They're gorgeous. I totally agree. What was funny is I was watching this with my wife, and she actually, her only complaint was about the textures.
What? The textures?
Yeah. It was specifically the scene at the beginning when Crosshair is trying to eat his lunch. She's like, I can't tell the difference between the chicken breast in the bowl.
Yeah, the textures
it's really specific. Yeah, it's like really detailed and really like sharp and everything. And I think they've just chosen to do it that way.
Yeah,
they look like moving paintings. Yeah,
they do. That moving
hand painted.
Yeah. The textures all have this very, I guess, real kind of. I don't know. They're not like if you actually held up a real chicken wing next to like what he was eating, it's like, okay, that doesn't look anything like it. But I don't know. I think it conveys the message, right? Like it conveys the idea as to what it is, and it's not just a simple solid color.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I'm told it was a chicken, but it does look like a potato.
I mean, like, is there even chicken in Star Wars? Like, this blows my mind. Actually, I never even thought about that.
Bad Batch season 2 episode 3 rating 1 out of 10 because the chicken doesn't look like chicken.
Chicken looks too much like a potato.
Dude, those are the kind of comments you find on Reddit. Like this episode sucks because there's no chicken in Star Wars. Like, oh man, I'm looking forward to the Lego set. In which we get a little Lego, chicken drumstick.
Little chicken breast. That'll be chicken. Yeah. Chicken confirmed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast again, and I guess we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All right, and thank you everyone tuning in to the show, whether you're on YouTube, watching through our YouTube channel, or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, wherever you are. We're glad that you were able to join us today, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. We hope you're enjoying the Bad Batch because we're really liking it a lot. So, brief message from a friend of ours here on the podcast, actually.
Jabberooed with fear. You also did not listen to Star Wars Escape Pod. If you know what's good for you, tune in, subscribe, share this show with a partner in crime, leave a good review.
That's right. Leave a good review. And tune in next week for another after show for The Bad Batch, as well as our breakdown for tonight's release of the new Mandalorian Season 3 trailer, which has just hit YouTube as of 20 minutes ago. So make sure you look that up and do some speculation on that. Post any questions you have to us using the new channel in our Discord server for podcast-related questions. We're going to get to that on the show in future episodes, so make sure you post one there. Join the Discord server. It's where the action is, where the forums are. We're hoping to connect with our audience a lot more on there. Feel free to follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Send us an email using the handle at SWScape Podcast. And we'll see you in the next episode of Star Wars Escape Pod. May the Force be with you.